Are you ready to say goodbye to the constant ups and downs of the artist income roller coaster? Whether you're a full-time artist who wants to increase and stabilize your income, a part-time musician who wants to go full-time, or a hobbyist who needs to fund your passion projects, this podcast will equip you with the tools, resources, and inspiration to make it happen. My name is Bree Noble. I'm a musician, best-selling author, and educator whose mission is to help musicians like you to increase the income you're already making and tap into new income streams so you can create a more diverse, stable, reliable income from music and finally ditch the starving artist mentality. Now let's dive into the Profitable Musician Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Bree Noble, and I am excited to be here today with Angela Beeching. And when she, introduced herself to me, I was excited because she wanted to talk about things that I love to talk about. A lot of fears that hold musicians back. A fear of, if I charge too much, they won't give me the gig, or am I really worth that? Fear of getting rejected if I put myself out there and try to get some bookings, try to get some students, things like that. So we're going to delve into all of that. But before we do, I always like to start with the background, the story. So, I usually don't kind of do bios on here, but I do want to mention that Angela has worked at several universities helping them with their music related programs. So she's got a lot of experience. She's currently coaching artists, so she knows what she's talking about. And so I'd love for you, Angela, just to let everybody know kind of what is your background? How did you get involved in music? How did you get involved working with students at universities and building programs there? And why are you now coaching a one-on-one?
Sure. And thank you, Bree. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll try to make this succinct because I'm 65, so I've been around the block a few times. But I started out as a cellist. If someone had told me when I was younger that I'd ever end up doing this music career coaching work that I do, I would have said they were crazy because I was so focused and only on the cello. So I didn't care about any of the career stuff. I was just in love with music. And when I was in school, my dream after a while was to get a tenure track college teaching job because I thought that if I did that, I would have died and gone to heaven and I could play lots of chamber music. And I'm living proof that sometimes in life you can get what you want and only then decide, whoops, it wasn't quite the way I imagined it. So I was dead set on I got a doctorate, I did all the things, and then I got really burnt out. And I had to just figure out, what am I going to do with my life now? And because when I was a grad student, I had petitioned the school to start a music career department. And they said, fine, we're going to make that your teaching assistantship. You get to do that. So I had this experience and then I went and got the university teaching jobs. That was all great. But once I was burnt out, I moved back to Boston, was really like it there. And a job at New England Conservatory opened up running their career development center. And back at that time, there really weren't schools that had these kinds of programs. And while I was there, I needed a book to use while I was teaching these career development courses. And there wasn't a book, so I wrote my own, and that's been published, and it's with Oxford University Press, 3rd edition. So none of this stuff was what I had imagined for myself. I took that job thinking, no, I'll do this for a year or so until I figure out what I really want to do with my life. But I stayed at New England Conservatory for 17 years because I love helping musicians find their own path. What's so fascinating to me is that it's always different for each person, and the fears that come up for one person aren't the same for the next, and to me it's just fascinating work. So essentially, even though I worked at New England Conservatory and Manhattan School of Music and Indiana University over the years, now I'm in private practice as a music career coach. But what I get to do and what I love is helping musicians get more of their best work out into the world so they can become the artists they are meant to be.
I love that. And I love that you're saying like I started out and I never thought I was going to do this, because I think we all kind of go through that. And
Mhm.
I've had a few people on this show that said like my goal was this thing. I was so focused on it. I got my doctorate, all that. And then I realized I didn't want to do that and I got really burnt out. Like it's not uncommon. And I
Mhm.
think that's one reason that drives me with this podcast and just like our brand in general, Profitable Musician. It's like there are so many ways you can make money with music. And if you find that the thing that you chose, that you put all your eggs in that basket, if that's not working for you, there are other things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think the fascinating thing in that is you want something that lights you up inside. And sometimes when you're so burnt out with the, whatever plan A was, it can feel like nothing is gonna light you up. So that sort of that depression or that grief process, that's a real thing. And just for any musicians listening who've been through that or who are in it now, I just want you to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
That is definitely good to mention. And I've been through at least like three phases of my career. So just because you really work hard at one thing and then you realize it's not for you, that doesn't mean you're done. And I
Right.
think that's a really good distinction. Like if you feel so burnt out that you literally are like, I don't think anything will get me excited, if you find the thing, you'll find that you will get excited.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But it's a little
great.
scary when you get in that position, right? Of like
Sure.
everything just seems so hopeless and dark. Okay, let's change this subject to make it a little more happy. But I did want to say like I'm so thankful to you for kind of trailblazing those programs at schools, because I graduated in 1994 and there was no such thing as music career anything. It's like you
Mhm.
teach or you perform. That's what we train you to do here. We don't tell you how you get jobs at that. We just
Yeah.
train you to be a really good musician and then we send you out into the world and good luck.
Yep. I have to say that it's still the case, though. Lots of schools have these programs, but not everyone who's in one of those programs is yet ready to be thinking about this stuff.
Mm,
So I think that's one of the reasons why there can be so much fear when you get out in the world is that in when we're in school, we think almost like the business side of our art is the enemy. I mean,
mhm,
at least that was always how it was portrayed in my mind, and that's how my colleagues talked about it, is that there was so much fear about selling out in some way, or somehow that if you take time away from practicing to do anything else, that is just antithetical to what you want to do as an artist. And so that thing about these two areas fighting against each other, the art and the business, that's a real issue that comes up for people. And being able to manage your time so that you can balance both sides is an art in itself, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I definitely see that. I see that with my clients, with people that respond to my emails. I even wrote something pretty recently about this. Um, the whole idea of like, just because you want to make money with your art, that doesn't mean you're selling out. Like you have to live and all that. I think in the college experience, there is almost like shame around that. And like when you're
Mhm.
in college, it's like we are here to become amazing musicians and we don't want to think about this other stuff. And there might even be like, you know, your peers thinking, oh, you shouldn't be thinking about that because that's going to detract from you becoming the best musician that you can be. So I can definitely see that happening. I also think that when you're in college, you're not in the real quote real world yet. You're not out there like doing the thing. So you might be thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I can totally book myself. I can totally get a studio of students, like no big deal. Because you're learning the thing in a book or from a professor.
Mhm.
But once you get out there and you try to do the thing and you maybe get rejected a few times, or you realize you don't really know how to write an email to get someone to pay attention to you for a booking, or you don't know how to price yourself and all that stuff because you haven't been doing it in the real world, you can easily be like, oh no, this isn't for me, I can't do this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you help people get kind of into that next level of like, okay, now like the idea sounds good. And I think I could do it. But once I started doing it, I'm like,
Yeah,
you get shot down a few times and then you might think, oh, this isn't for me.
yeah, absolutely. Well, one way I try to help my clients is by normalizing this. Those fears are going to come up. That's a part of our resistance. And resistance, the way I think about it, that's the term Stephen Pressfield uses when he's talking about the force that is in some ways trying to keep all of us from from fulfilling our potential, from becoming who we really can be. So resistance is like the part of the brain, the amygdala, the reptilian brain. It's the fight, flight, or freeze instinct that shows up anytime we're outside of our comfort zone. So if we know to expect that this is going to happen, and that actually part of the reason we have that that very base instinct, one of the advantages of having this is that that when you're pushing against it because you're doing something to grow, that's a sign. That's a sign that you're going in the right direction. Yeah, because the biggest fears are going to come up when we're striving or even considering doing the thing that's going to bring the most growth. So the projects that we have, if it really matters to us because it's our own music or because we're daring to get ourselves out into the world, you should expect the resistance to show up. And then I teach clients, short tools for how to get past our own fears, how to like push against this. And I myself have to use this stuff because it often comes down to there's one scary email that needs to be sent, like to get us started, or that scary conversation that we have to have with someone that we've been putting off, maybe a band member or whatever. Like, you have to at some point ask yourself, what is really standing in my way? What is that action step that I've, keep crossing off or not crossing off the to-do list, keep adding it onto the next page for the next day. And I keep telling myself I'm too busy when it's actually, I'm afraid.
No, I mean, to be on, let's be honest, we all have this. This is not just you
Yeah.
guys, musicians, right? Like for me, it's I need to get more sponsors for my podcast or my newsletter. And it's like I'm building up this, a list of people I want to reach out to, but then it's like, well, I need to make the list bigger because I'm going to send them all at the same time, or I really need to get my newsletters done before I do that this week. And somehow, you know what I mean? So we
Yep.
all have these things. And it's
Yeah.
just the, new level, new devil kind of thing, or, whatever business you're in, you're gonna have that. That's normal. And I always tell my clients, like, if you're not doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable at least once a week, you're definitely not growing and you're just going to be getting the same results, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe you've gotten really good at doing cover gigs and getting those gigs and you've got a whole system around it, but you really want to promote your original music and you
Mhm.
haven't done that because you got a system, you're doing it, you're making money with your covers, but you need to go to the next step. So there's like always a next step that you need to do. And I love that you've got some tools around that to help them to get past it because we're all going to feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Ugh.
one thing that I advise people to do, I don't know if you've done this for yourself, Bree, if this works for you, but for me, I find if I schedule the scary thing first in the day, and I can get it done almost before I've really thought too much about it, it's a huge, huge win. And if at the end of the day, when I'm like, before I close out the light, I'm like thinking over the day, like what went well, what do I feel good about? If I'm able to say that I did the scariest thing on my list, I feel like $1,000,000. Like usually if you do that, then the other difficult things that you have during the day feel like nothing compared to that scary thing, which once you've done it, usually you're thinking, at least I do, think, why did I have so much fear built up over this?
Yeah, and I
But
think, I mean, first thing definitely could be it. Sometimes it's about when do you have the most
Mhm,
energy to work on your thing. Like for me, I am a morning person. So yes, the first thing for me works really good. And there'll be something that if I need to do and it's like 3 o'clock, and I'll feel like it's the hardest thing in the world because I just
mhm,
don't have that energy. Some people are night people. So I tell them, hey,
yeah,
if you sit down and you do your best work on your music stuff at 8 p.m., do that thing first when you sit down at that time. It doesn't have to be first thing in the
yeah,
day, but first thing in your session.
yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think that thing about figuring out best time of day for your creative work, and then best time of day for that dealing with the business side
Mhm.
of this. Those two things really matter. And yeah, there can be huge fear around the artistic work too, and huge fear around taking care of business.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So just really knowing yourself. So I definitely want to get to the pricing thing because I know that's something people really struggle with. But let's start with the first thing that is going to put a roadblock for you with the whole idea of rejection. Before you
Ah,
even get to the price conversation, you have to get a conversation started, whether it's with a booking someone you're trying to book with, or whether if you're trying to like get a new student or something. What are the fears that you find around reaching out to people, especially if it's cold? Um,
yeah.
and, do you have any suggestions on how to overcome those as far as like, okay, if email's not working for you, you should try the phone or because I mean, let's be honest, like email is easy, right? It's less
Mhm.
painful if you get rejected or you get ghosted, but if you call people or if you walk into their establishment and they're ignoring you, that's much more difficult.
Well, I'll say also harder to do if you walk in. But yeah, I mean, most of my clients are booking stuff by email. And it's amazing how many excuses and how many roadblocks we all do this, we set in front of ourselves. Like, like, oh, I can't send those pitches out yet because I'm not happy with my sound samples, or I'm not
Right.
happy with the website that I'm sending them
My
to. And
EPK
then,
is not organized. Yeah, I don't have
yeah,
enough
yeah, yeah.
quotes. Yeah, all the
Right.
things.
And then a whole year can go by and they haven't gone further with that. So they set up these roadblocks for themselves. I'm just thinking about a client I talked with yesterday, a violinist who books her own shows with a pianist, and she's very good. And her website, it needed some polishing, but it was in really good shape, lots of good sound samples, video. But in her head, reaching out to presenters, even when she'd gotten recommendations, even when she knew these series, was felt like it was an impossible thing. So a lot of musicians I find feel like there's some magic, formula for how to send like the perfect, pitch. And my so the thing that I find is they delay like crazy sending it out. Then they send out only a few and they're heartbroken if they don't get any response and they don't follow up. So the thing that I like to talk to people about is, yeah, you want to have a basic pitch that you've really gotten some good feedback on, and you've gotten some trusted comments on it, and maybe even workshopped it with a presenter or someone who's booked you in the past. Like, what did they see anything here that could be improved on? So having confidence that you're sending out something that represents you well and actually piques the curiosity, and that you don't have a lame subject line so that someone wouldn't actually bother opening it, right? All of that really helps.
Or a
And then
bravado subject line like, I'm the best person you'll book this year or something.
yeah, perfect for your season, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and oh my God, I've seen so many, like I'm sure you have too, Bree. We've all seen lots of mistakes that people make. And we've made our own mistakes with these things. Some people so worried about being concise that they don't really describe their music and what they're offering in a compelling way. Or they go the other direction and they attach this long bio or
Everything. Yes.
yeah. So So just to realize there's a real person you're trying to connect with, and you want to pique their curiosity, and you want, first of all, to make some sort of connection with them in that email. And so bothering to do a little research and finding out, am I barking up the right tree? Is this an appropriate venue for me? Makes a big difference. That's one of the things that I love in working with clients. I'm sure you do too, Bree, is like when you see someone really work through these things and then you see them start to get good results,
Mm.
it's such a win. And so this violinist is working, I've been working with her. She ended up sending out some really tailored, pitches. I think she sent out 8 and she got 2, bookings from that, and then 2 sort of question marks. And I told her what a fabulous ratio that is, because, of course, she would like all 8, but to have a quarter of them come back as actual shows is fantastic. And then once you're in that mode and you're just sending out more and more, the ratio to be thinking about is, have you met your quota of how many you're planning to send out this week or this month or whatever? Because your job is not to decide yes or no. It's not, you don't get to choose, how many of these are gonna be wins. You have to learn from it, but your job is to get those out.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit of a juxtaposition, right? Because we do want this to be like you're trying to develop a personal relationship with people, but also
Mhm.
it is a numbers game,
Yep. Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
we can't like spend all day trying to connect with this one person. We
Right.
need to start like little conversations with as many as we can and then go deeper with the ones that are responding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a mindset thing, at least I've seen this in my clients, where they're not thinking of this as building a relationship with someone that they're going to know over the years, or places that they would book again, or people that they could refer other artists to. Like, they're not thinking of this as a real human, connecting.
Mhm.
um, and the more you can, the better you are, because nobody wants to be treated like a number. Nobody wants to get something that's anonymous, or yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were talking before we started recording about when you contacted me about being on the podcast, right? I didn't know you,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah.
was like, based upon what you sent me, you clearly had listened to my show. You know who my audience is. You gave very specific ways that you could provide value. And it was clear to me that you knew what you were talking about versus I get a lot of pitches from PR agents that they haven't even paid attention to the fact that we only serve musicians, which is
Yeah.
like, hello, did you even look at the title of the podcast? So, even
Yeah.
being able to just talk about, say, hey, I saw that you had this person, we're both in that genre, and that
Mhm.
kind of thing, that would even help. Just drawing those connections
Yeah,
of things that they've already
absolutely.
done. It makes you feel, as the person receiving the pitch, like someone's actually taken the trouble to do the research.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm
No.
curious, like, we kind of talked a little bit about this, but like, is there any way to reframe or that you help people reframe the responses that they get if the answer is no? Because sometimes
Ah,
it's no, but, or no, and, or, and then of
yeah.
course, sometimes there's the ones where nobody responds at all. How many times do you suggest they keep going back?
Ah, well, most musicians I talk to don't even bother to do a follow-up, and that just like drives me nuts, right? So the follow-up, this whole thing about like keeping a spreadsheet, when did you send it, what's the follow-up date, all of that really does help. Um, I don't know what you say, Bree. I would say it's okay to follow up twice, and after that, leave it alone, right? And
Yeah.
uh
And
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 I've
also
also
there is a barrier, like, for example, I always have my assistant respond first when people are pitching to me because I get so many, right? And
Mhm.
then she might ask a follow-up question.
Mhm.
And that, so it might take several times of back and forth before we even see if it's a good fit. So, that may be the case. And then, maybe the assistant is out on maternity leave or whatever. Like, you never know, but
Yeah,
people tell all these stories in their head about, oh, they hate me and
yeah.
they.
Yeah, I mean, I always, ask musicians, do they ever let their emails pile up? Have they meant to return something? And then the person, I always say to them, I'm happy when someone says, hey, I sent this to you, 2 weeks ago, not sure if you had a chance to see it. I thank them for
Mhm.
this because, we're only human. So yeah, I think that's the real thing.
Yes. Yeah. We have ups and downs of life. We have, things that happen in our personal life that keep us away from our email. I love that reframe though, because so many musicians hate the admin that they do let it pile up. And
Yep,
then they're
yep,
like,
yep,
oh yeah, I guess I do that.
yeah. Oh, and I think the other thing that happens is we let the outcome of any of these pitches be somehow an indictment or of our value. And that thing about whether it's the rejection or the acceptance and whether whatever fee they're saying they can offer, we make that like, oh, this is about my worth as an individual. And so that's a conversation I like to have with people early on, because the amount that you can be paid for a gig has nothing to do with your value as a person or your value as a musician. Most of the time it has to do with the budget that someone has. And it's important to negotiate. It's important to find out as much as you can. It's important to put your best out there, right? See what the market will bear. But if if you're letting that external validation, that sign of external validation affect your own sense of worth, that's just a recipe for heartache. Because it's not about the money. We want to be able to do well, right? But especially if you're getting started or you're trying out a new market or you're building up new repertoire, it may be more important at this point in your game to be just out in front of audiences and to be playing more. So that thing about making it a do or die, you know, um, thing, I just think that this is pain that we don't have to suffer.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It really is more about them, like the person that you're talking to versus you, as far as like their situation could be a budget thing, could be who knows what. Maybe they have a problem with valuing musicians and that's their problem. Like it's
Mhm.
affecting you, but it could be
Yeah.
their problem. Like if you can stand in your own value and then you can make your own decision. Do I want to play for $50? No, I don't. It's not worth it to me. I know, I've had different opinions about this depending on where I was in my life. After I had my daughter, I was like, I refuse to leave the house for less than $100 because I can't
Mhm.
afford to,
Yep.
even if
Yep.
it's down the street.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then I probably have to have a babysitter or something. Even if it's, go play 30 minutes down the street, I still wouldn't do it for less than
Right.
$100. Now, in my early career, sure, I would. And like you said, I love that you said like it depends on what you need and because sometimes we might need to practice a repertoire, right? And if we can do that in front of an audience, it's gonna give us a lot more juice for our practice time than if we're doing it at home because we're getting some feedback and that kind of
Mhm.
thing. So it may be worth it doing a low paying gig or even a no pay gig once in a while. And if you establish your own kind of idea about this and you're feeling good and strong about it in yourself, then it doesn't matter. Like the amount really doesn't matter. It's about how you feel about the amount, and whether it's serving you at that time, I think.
Yeah, I think the flip side of this is that, which is also true, right, is that women are notorious for not negotiating.
Mhm.
This is an issue. And it's not just women. I think people who are in other marginalized groups, it may feel like this thing that you cannot do. That's a little bit like bragging, like all of these things that get in the way of becoming who we really can be. So when I'm talking to musicians about how much they're charging for lessons if they teach, and how much they are getting for performances, or when they're asked their fee for solo or chamber performances or whatever they're offering, I ask them what do they say? And when I'm hearing really low fees and I ask them, when have you raised this, or what are you basing that on? They'll often say, well, it's what I know, my colleagues are charging. I said, have you checked lately? Do you really know that or not? And very often when it comes to booking a gig, people will feel like if I name the fee, and that this is typical, that a presenter or the venue manager will ask, what's the fee that you're looking for? I will often say to people, you can use a phrase like, my usual fee is X, right? And that leaves room because you said usual. So if it turns out that that is way outside their budget range, then you can have a conversation, right?
Yeah, but if they're like, if you say my usual fee is 500 and they say, well, we pay 100, then you can just, you can make that decision, right? You can just be like, no, I
Yeah,
can't do
yeah,
that.
exactly. Right. Yeah, to know your bottom line. I mean, this is like if you're playing gigs. I remember the guy I taught with at New England Conservatory was a very active freelance guitarist, and he would say, never quote your fee before you know all the details of what they're asking for. He was talking about like the wedding gigs from hell when you
Mm,
have to accompanying
I,
accompany the bride's sister, and you're having to rearrange all this music. It's a nightmare, and the travel, all of that. So a lot of this is about it can be come down to educating people who don't normally pay musicians if you're doing house concerts and things like this. And there's a way you need to be able to talk about the money stuff without it activating your defensiveness and a feeling of like you're as if you're negotiating something and playing hardball with the other person. The ideal kind of negotiation is where both parties win. And in order to do that, they might have to give up a little on their side to find something that will work.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes we have these expectations of like, well, they should know that I would never play it for less than this much. It's like you said, like sometimes they've never negotiated with musicians. I've done events where the events
Mhm.
planners never had experience with musicians before because a lot of
Yep.
times I was maybe be the speaker and the musician and
Mhm.
or and they just I don't know, they just had completely different expectations. And then on the other
Yeah.
end, same thing. If they're used to speakers, those fees are usually a lot higher. So you
Yeah.
don't want to just go, oh, $300 when they would have paid you 1,000.
Right, right, exactly. So it's always a good tactic if you can ask, well, what is your budget range? Like if you can get them, the usual saying is he who quotes a number first loses.
That's right.
So yeah, try to get them talking first, but a lot of times they know that. So that's where I would use the usual fee. If you've done enough research, if you know some people who've already performed there, if you've got a sense of what level people are, so you can do your best with the fee. The other thing I like doing is if people are gradually trying to move their fees up, but they're afraid to make a big leap, that's understandable. So, my own business coach will say you have to grow into your pricing shoes, right? It has to, you have to feel like you can just quote that fee when it comes down to it and know that you're really delivering good value, that there's no question in your mind.
Yeah, and I think on the other side, you need to know on the low side, I always say like make sure it's a number that won't have you resenting you having to do the
Yeah,
right. If you're like,
exactly.
can't believe I said I'd do this for $100, and
Yeah.
then like ever since you said you'd do it, now you're just annoyed.
Yep. Yeah. And just to realize that annoyance is with yourself.
Mhm.
but it leaks out.
Oh
And
yeah, you
other
feel like it's
people
their
feel it.
fault probably,
Yeah.
right? Because why did they ever even suggest this amount? I'm so I get that. Like, but yeah, you got to go back to like I'm the one that said yes.
Yeah, yeah. So it's one of the reasons why I practice this stuff with clients. We do role playing on the phone.
Mm,
So
that's good.
yeah, yeah, because I don't think it's easy for people to talk money. So I mean, why would we think we would be good at it if we've never practiced it, right? That's crazy. People don't come out of the womb knowing how to do this.
That's for sure. Especially musicians. They tend to feel a lot more uncomfortable with money than others, I think. That's been my experience. I'm curious, do you suggest to them not to negotiate over email? Because I do tend to find that sometimes miscommunications
Mhm.
happen over email.
Yeah, I think what happens is musicians tend to read what's being proposed and then they feel stuck with it.
Mm,
But it's a great idea if it's clear that they're interested in you to say, let's hop on a call and talk this through. I think I think many musicians are afraid to do that because they don't know what to do with the silence once
mm.
they've named a fee, and they tend to like undercut themselves right away instead of standing firm with
Right. It could be like my fee is this or whatever. I usually charge this, and then the silence will be like, but I could do it for this,
Right,
I get that.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and there's still this thing about what does that fee actually mean to me, right? Like so that just to realize the part of the fee that does mean something here, I just want to say this is that when you treat your own work, your own music with respect, you're going to want to make sure that you're playing for decent fees. And it doesn't mean that it has to be exorbitant or whatever, but you have to decide, like you said, not for it to be a number that you're embarrassed by or you're resentful about. But but to know that this business of negotiating the fee and taking care of the contract and just making sure that things are done well is a way you show that you respect yourself and you're teaching other people to treat you that way and you want
Yeah.
to treat them that way. So that's the whole thing. I think people feel like, oh, well, it's music. I don't want to become a business person. But instead of thinking of it that way, I think about it just treating it with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, for sure. And I always am thinking of, well, if you want to keep doing music, you got to do the business side, or you're not going to have
Yeah,
any sustenance to keep doing music.
absolutely.
Right. Yeah, totally. Okay, well, we've talked about so much great stuff today. This has been really, really great. Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't covered or that you want to be sure to share, especially with indie artists that are having to figure out a lot of this stuff on their own? They don't have a
Yeah,
booking agent or a manager or anything to
right.
hold their hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I just I know we've been talking about a lot of scenarios that people have been through, but I just also want to acknowledge that every musician is their own story, right? They've got their own strengths, they've got their own weaknesses, they've got liabilities, they've got challenges, and they've got opportunities. And that's what's so great about working with a coach. So, someone like Bree, someone like me, there's others out there. But that thing about getting some objective expert help can make a huge difference. And I find that all of the process really starts with asking yourself the right questions. So there's a really simple PDF that I've got on my website that I would invite anyone who's interested to go to my website and download. It's called Musician's Pathfinder Guide. And I make this available to people because I found over the years that there's a small group of favorite questions that I like people to ask themselves to help them really think, like, where am I right now? What is in my way? What would help? So yeah, I would encourage you to go to angelabeeching.com and sign up for that Pathfinder guide because I would like to help more people.
I love that because the title of my book is The Musician's Profit Path. So we've got the path in
Mhm.
common because the path is so important for musicians because like you said, every path is a bit different.
Yeah,
It's all influenced by, your talent, your skills, but also your personality, your life situation. Like everybody is different. So figuring out your unique path is really important. And working with coaches like Angela is how you do that, I think. And, and being in community with other musicians too, which is why
Mhm.
I always, feel there's such value in communities like the Female Musician Academy that I have, is because you can learn from mentors like Angela and myself, and you can learn from other musicians that are
Mhm.
going through it at the same time you are. So there's value, I think, in both of those things for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Where can people find you online other than, so your website's angelabeeching.com, and then how about on social media? Where do you hang out?
I like to not hang out on social media as much as possible. That is the truth. So really the best way to find me is through my website. I mean, I am occasionally on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, but it's not my favorite place.
I get that. I completely get that. Yeah. But we will post these clips on Instagram. So
Yay!
so you
Good,
can
I
go find her on
appreciate that.
Instagram. And then when you're on her Instagram, you can go find her website and all the other links for sure.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Angela. This has been really good. This is the kind of conversations I love having because these are the things that I see come up the most for musicians, obstacles that are keeping them. And sometimes it's just a little bit of reframing that's keeping them from making huge leaps. And that's where coaches can help. So thank you for all of your insights.
Yeah, thank you for your work, Bree.
Thanks for listening to the Profitable Musician Show. I would love to know your takeaways and aha moments from this episode. Leave me a comment over at profitablemusician.com so I can bring you more of the information, interviews, and resources that you love. Thanks to Rondi Fay, one of my Academy members, for providing the music for our podcast. You can check her out at rondifay.com. That's RANDIFAY.com. Just remember, knowledge is power, but without implementation, it is useless. And inspiration without action is merely entertainment. But I know you're not just a dreamer, you are a doer. And I promise I'll be here every week to support you and remind you that you can be a profitable musician.